The Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Listen now for what the Holy Spirit is saying to the church. Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, while he dismissed the crowds that he fed with a couple loaves of bread and a fish. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But by this time the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning, Jesus came walking toward them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It is a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it's I. Do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come out to you on the water." And Jesus said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when Peter noticed the strong wind, he became frightened and began to sink. And he cried out, "Lord, save me." And Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. And those in the boat worshipped Jesus, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Christ. This is one of those stories that parts of the gospel that we hear over and over. Many times what the preachers focus on is the faith of Peter. Peter not trusting and kind of sometimes shaming Peter that Peter didn't have faith, and that's why he wasn't able to walk on the water. But I think there's a little more there, especially for us, the church. And especially for us today. Today, after the old event in Charlottesville, Virginia yesterday, and the violence, and all of the sin that we saw. In the gospel today, we saw Jesus. This is right after he did the great miracle. People following him, and out in the deserted place, there are 5,000 people, and Jesus tells the disciples to feed them because they don't have any food. And the disciples say, "What do we have? We don't have anything." And Jesus says, "Well, you got a couple loaves of bread and you have fish. Do that." And by some kind of miracle, a miracle of compassion, the compassion of Jesus for the 5,000, and then the compassion of the disciples to follow through, people were filled. And in fact, there was more than enough food. Everybody was filled. So that's what just happened. And if you remember from the gospel lesson last week, this deserted place that Jesus and the disciples went to, that was supposed to be their vacation. They were actually ended up working, doing miracles, proclaiming God on their vacation. So, in today's scripture, we pick up from there, and Jesus says, "Disciples, get back in the boat, go ahead of me. I'm going to do a little spiritual retreat by myself. I'm going to go and pray." So Jesus takes some me time, and he goes and prays. He's an introvert, Jesus is, so he's kind of getting centered. And the disciples are out on the boat. They have faith. They are trusting that Jesus will come to them. They don't know how he's going to meet up with them. All they know is that they're in a boat, they're heading that way, and Jesus will meet them on the other side. But as these disciples, remember, Jesus is not in the boat. The disciples are trusting what Jesus has said to them, and they are going where Jesus tells them to go. They are out in the boat, and in the morning, when they're in the boat, things get kind of rocky. Things are getting kind of shaky. The waves are starting to pick up and toss the boat to and fro. They're starting to get seasick. There's no Dramamine, by the way. And they're kind of wondering why they ate the leftover fish. And the clouds are getting dark, ominous. There might be like a little tornado in there too. We'll throw it in for you, just for little sea spouts that we have out on Lake Michigan when a storm comes around. It doesn't look good. They're already afraid because they're in a boat, they're away from the shore, they can't get back to shore fast enough. They are in the boat, they are starting to get afraid. They know that Jesus told them that they needed to go, but Jesus is not with them. There is fear rising up in them. What would you do if you were a disciple in that boat? And it seems like, some of them remember there are fishermen on that boat. Being on the sea is nothing new. And if the fishermen are afraid, everybody's afraid. And in that minute, in that moment, they see right there this figure walking on water coming to them. And if they were not afraid enough already with just the natural things, they start getting even more afraid because there's a ghost on the water. They are shaking, they are screaming. The boat now, the waves are tossing the boat back and forth. You got people, you got men on the boat that are totally afraid and making the boat shake even more. But then Jesus says to them, "It's me. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid." You know how many times Jesus says those words in the Gospels? Over and over and over and over again to these, what we call, the apostles, the disciples, the heroes, the people that have a strong faith. They ended up going and taking the gospel, the church to the ends of the world. These people, Jesus keeps telling them over and over and over and over before his crucifixion and after his crucifixion. When he appears to them behind locked doors, he tells them, "Do not be afraid. It's I. I'm here. Do not be afraid." Do not be afraid. Don't let the fear that you have overcome you. Don't let the fear shake you to your core and your bones and start making that boat rock even more and make this into a greater disaster than what it already could be. Do not be afraid. It is I'm here. And when Peter hears the voice of Jesus, and Jesus say this, Peter says, "Tell me, Lord, to come out to you, and I will." Because, Peter is that kind of guy. He never really totally thinks through before he says something. Over and over, he does that. And so he says, do it, Lord, tell me to come out there, tell me to come out there. Notice that he doesn't just do it, he says, tell me first. Tell me I want to be on this roller coaster. Tell me how fun it is. Tell me to take that step of faith. Lord, tell me, command it, and I'll do it. But I'm not going to do it on my own. You've got to tell me to do it. And so Jesus says, come out here. The water's clear. It's warm. Come to me, Peter. And Peter does. He gets out of the boat. And Peter is doing what? He's walking on water. It's another miracle. It's amazing. He's walking on water. And remind you, the waves are still crashing. The storm is coming closer. The storm is right there. You can see the rain coming down, straight down. There's lightning. There's thunder. Peter's out on the water. He had faith. He had trust. He had hope. He knew that Jesus said he could do it. He was doing it. And he was doing it. And he was being the person that Jesus called him to be, the one to come out of the water, to come to Jesus. Peter had his eyes right on Jesus. He was focused on Jesus. And then what does the gospel say? Peter took his eyes off of Jesus. He saw the storm. He saw the rain. He saw the lightning, he saw the thunder, he saw the waves, and in that moment the fear overcame him, and Peter started to sink into the stormy waters, the dark, dark, murky waters. Peter was sinking down. Life was being taken from Peter, and Peter was overwhelmed again with fear. And he yells out, "Lord, save me." That's the part that I want us to focus on this morning. The part where we are out in the storm. We are in the midst of a storm, and violent waves, rush of wind, violent winds. Darkness is overcoming us. We are sinking down. But do we do what Peter does? Do we call out to Jesus? Do we put our focus back on Jesus? Do we yell out, "Lord, save us"? Do we reach our hand out so Jesus can grab our hand as we are sinking down into the darkness of humanity? Do we ask, "Lord, save me from the sin and the evil of this world that is overcoming us, that's drowning us"? Do we ask for God to save us, to liberate us, to free us, to grab our hand and pull us out back into safety, to stand us up, to stand firm again with Jesus as our focus? Are we, as the church, as disciples of Jesus Christ, are we asking God to help us? What does Paul say in his letter to the Romans today? Because the church in Rome was also in the midst of violence, fire, persecution, riots. People were out to kill the disciples, the followers of Jesus in Rome. And what does Paul say to the Christians in Rome? Call out. Call out to the Lord. Call out. Not everybody that calls out to the Lord and accepts Him as your Savior, your Liberator, if you call out and reach your hand out to Jesus so He can pull you up out of the darkness of our humanity, then you will be saved. You will be liberated. And not just you, but everybody who has that experience with Jesus, you will go out and you're going to share that experience, that good news, that possibility that you could help raise people out of the darkness. From your witness, from your story of faith, other people will be saved through Jesus. God is not in the violent wind. God is not in the violence of humans against humans. God is not in violence. God is not in war. God is not against any race or people. Just as Paul says in the letter to Romans, God is the God of all people, Gentile and Jew. All race, ethnicity. Every human being is a child of God. God is not in the forces of destruction. For what does the Apostle John say in his letter? God is love. We as the church, especially the Presbyterian Church USA, we have 3 confessions in our book of confessions, which is what we ask our elders and our deacons to say, that they take a vow that they're going to uphold and use it as to be instructed and to guide the church in. We have 3 confessions in our book of confessions. The Confession of Barmen, which was written by the confessing pastors in Germany when the Nazi church was taking over the Church of Germany. And these courageous pastors and members of the churches yelled out and said, "Lord, save us." And they wrote a confession saying that basically we as the church need to stand up, be pulled up and stand with Jesus against what the Nazi party stood for. Then we have the confession in 1967. Who remembers the 60s? What was one of the big things of the 60s? The Civil Rights Movement. The confession talks about our responsibility as the church to stand up against racism of all kinds. First with our own selves. We got to look at where we are. We have to admit we're sinking. And then together, as the church, take a stand against all forms of racism. And then the most recent confession is the Confession of Belhar, which was written in the midst of apartheid in South Africa. And guess what it talks about? That church, if the church supports segregation and apartheid, it is not the church. In fact, if the church remains silent, it is not the church. We have a responsibility as Christians, as followers of Jesus. So one of the questions we have today is, we see ourselves and our fellow neighbors. We are sinking in the darkness of humanity, in the evil of the world. Do you yell out, Lord, save me? Will you stretch your hand out? And if you do, and Jesus pulls you up to stand with you, to be with you, no matter what are you willing to do as the church of Jesus Christ today? Are you willing to study and learn about your own bias and ways of participating in institutional racism? Because we do it, whether we like it or not. We do it, but we have to recognize it. And then what are we willing to do as a community against racism and those things that are the darkness that's here in Waukesha? As I've said already, from our community organizing, we know racism is here in Waukesha. What are we going to do about it, disciples of Jesus Christ? First, are you going to reach your hand out and ask Jesus to save you? All praise, honor, and glory be to you, O Christ. Amen. Let us stand and sing together a hymn from the Civil Rights Movement. And it's not in your bulletin, but especially if you do harmony, I got you the harmony slide.